The prison riot had been raging for 6 hours. Glass shattered, and alarms screamed through Block C of Federal Correctional Institution Riverside, as 300 inmates had taken control of the maximum security wing. Outside, FBI negotiators paced frantically, while tactical teams prepared for what could become a bloodbath. 12 guards were trapped inside, along with 47 prisoners who wanted no part of the violence, but had nowhere to run. In the chaos, one figure sat quietly in the corner of cell block C, seemingly invisible among the madness. Rachel Martinez, prisoner number 47291, remained perfectly still on her bunk, while other inmates around her either joined the riot or cowered in fear. At 5'6", with greying brown hair and soft features, she looked like someone's grandmother who'd made a terrible mistake with tax evasion or embezzlement. The riot leaders had dismissed her immediately. To them, she was just another white-collar criminal, probably some accountant who'd skimmed money from charity funds. She never spoke up in the yard, never caused trouble, never even raised her voice. In a prison full of hardened criminals, Rachel Martinez was forgettable, invisible, completely unremarkable. But as she sat there, watching the chaos unfold, her fingers unconsciously traced a small scar on her wrist, a scar that told a very different story than her prison record suggested. Rachel Martinez's file read like a dozen others in the federal system. 52 years old, former non-profit administrator from Portland, Oregon, serving 18 months for financial fraud. She'd allegedly embezzled $200,000 from a veterans charity organization where she'd worked as a bookkeeper. A quiet crime committed by a quiet woman who'd gotten in over her head with gambling debts. The other inmates had sized her up on day one and found her harmless. She read books, kept two, herself, and seemed to spend most of her time writing letters to family members who never wrote back. Even the guards barely noticed her. She was the model prisoner who caused zero problems and would serve her time without incident. What nobody knew, not the warden, not the FBI, not even the federal prosecutors who'd put her here, was that Rachel Martinez's entire identity was an elaborate cover story constructed by the most classified levels of American intelligence. Her real name was Colonel Rachel Martinez, and for 23 years she'd been one of the military's most elite psychological operations specialists. She'd run infiltration missions in places like Afghanistan, Iraq, and Syria, using her unremarkable appearance and natural ability to read human behavior to embed herself in terrorist organizations and criminal networks. She could analyze group dynamics, predict violence, and manipulate crowd psychology with surgical precision. The fraud charges were fabricated. A deep cover operation designed to place her inside Federal Correctional Institution Riverside. For months, intelligence agencies had suspected that someone within the prison system was coordinating with international arms dealers, using the prison's work release programs and visitor systems to smuggle classified information. They needed someone inside who could identify the network without arousing suspicion. Rachel had volunteered for what was supposed to be a 6-month mission. She'd been inside for 8 months now, slowly building trust, carefully mapping the prison's social networks, identifying the players in what had turned out to be a massive intelligence leak that reached all the way to the Pentagon. She'd been scheduled for extraction in 2 weeks. But today, everything had changed. The riot wasn't random violence, it was a coordinated distraction. While everyone focused on the chaos in Block C, the real operation was happening in the administrative wing, where her targets were using the confusion to destroy evidence and eliminate witnesses. The first test came when inmate Tony the Bull Carrera, a 300-pound gang leader serving life for murder, decided to make an example of someone. His eyes landed on Rachel, sitting quietly with her book while violence erupted around her. "Hey, Grandma!" he shouted, advancing toward her cell. "Time to pick a side. You're either with us or you're a snitch who needs to learn some respect." Rachel looked up from her book, her expression mild and confused. "I'm sorry, I don't understand. I just want to stay out of trouble." Tony laughed, a sound that made other inmates step back. "You hear that, boys? She wants to stay out of trouble. He grabbed her arm, his massive hand easily circling her wrist. In here, neutral ain't an option. What Tony couldn't see was how Rachel's body had subtly shifted, her weight balanced on the balls of her feet, her free hand positioned for maximum leverage. Her 23 years of tactical training had become muscle memory, but she forced herself to remain in character. Breaking cover now would blow an 8-month operation. Instead, she allowed herself to be pulled from her cell, projecting fear and confusion, while her trained mind analyzed the riot's true structure. This wasn't random prison violence. The timing was too precise, the coordination too smooth. Someone was directing this chaos, using it as cover for something bigger. As Tony dragged her through the block, Rachel's psychological operations training kicked in. She began reading the crowd dynamics, identifying the real leaders versus the followers, spotting the inmates who were acting versus those genuinely caught up in mob mentality. Within minutes, she'd mapped the entire social structure of the riot. But her biggest challenge wasn't physical. It was psychological. Every instinct told her to take control, to use her training to end this situation quickly and efficiently. But doing so would expose her mission and potentially cost lives in the long run. She had to remain helpless while people around her suffered, trusting that her sacrifice would serve a greater purpose. Everything changed when the riot leaders dragged guard Captain Stevens into the main recreation area. Stevens wasn't just any guard. Rachel knew from her intelligence briefings that he was the liaison who'd been feeding classified information to foreign agents. The riot wasn't about prison conditions or grievances. It was about silencing Stevens before he could testify in a federal investigation. But as they forced Stevens to his knees, Rachel realized something that made her blood run cold. Stevens wasn't the target. He was bait. Hidden cameras had been recording everything, and the real operation was happening in the warden's office 3 floors up, where the actual evidence was being destroyed while everyone watched the theater below. When Tony raised a makeshift knife towards Stevens, Rachel made a decision that would expose her, but save both the mission and innocent lives. "Stop," she said quietly, but her voice carried an authority that made heads turn. Tony looked back at her in confusion. "What did you say, Grandma?" Rachel stood up slowly, and something fundamental had changed in her posture, her expression, the way she held herself. "I said stop, all of you. This ends now." The transformation was so complete that several inmates actually stepped backward. The nervous, frightened woman had vanished, replaced by someone who radiated command presence like heat from a fire. "You don't know what you're doing," she continued, her voice now carrying the unmistakable tone of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "This riot is being orchestrated. You're being used." Tony laughed, but there was uncertainty in it now. "Lady, you're about to get yourself killed, talk turn. In crazy." "My name is Colonel Rachel Martinez, United States Army Intelligence," she said, stepping forward. "Serial number 5782960. I'm operating under classified authority, and this facility is now under military jurisdiction." The recreation area fell completely silent. Even the background noise of the riot seemed to fade as every person present tried to process what they'd just heard. "You're insane," Tony said, but his voice had lost its earlier confidence. Rachel reached into her uniform pocket and pulled out something that made several inmates gasp. A military challenge coin, but not just any coin. This one bore the seal of Joint Special Operations Command, issued only to the most elite operatives. She'd kept it hidden for 8 months, but now she held it where everyone could see. "Tony Carrera," she said, her voice calm but carrying absolute authority. "You're serving life for the murder of DEA agent Patricia Hendricks in 2019. What you don't know is that Agent Hendricks was my partner in a joint task force operation. I've been waiting 2 years to meet you." Tony's face went white. Around the rec area, inmates who'd been ready for violence suddenly found themselves questioning everything they thought they knew. But Rachel wasn't done. She turned to face the group, and her next words would be repeated in intelligence briefings for years to come. Every person in this room has a choice. You can continue this charade and become accessories to treason, or you can help me stop the people who've been using you as puppets. Just as Rachel began to gain control of the situation, the worst possible thing happened. The lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in red, and through the facility's PA system came a voice none of them recognized. "Attention, Federal Correctional Institution, Riverside. You have 15 minutes to evacuate all personnel from TTAS, He Building. This facility will be destroyed to eliminate evidence of ongoing federal investigations. This is not a negotiation." The threat wasn't coming from the inmates. It was coming from outside. Rachel's mission had been compromised from the beginning. The people she'd been investigating had known about her presence and were now using the riot as cover to eliminate the entire facility, including all witnesses and evidence. Panic erupted among inmates and guards alike. But Rachel's training kicked in at the deepest level. This wasn't just about her mission anymore. It was about 300 lives, including people she'd come to know during her 8 months undercover. "Guards, sound off," she commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos with military precision. To everyone's amazement, the guards, trained to recognize authority in crisis situations, responded immediately. "Stevens here. Rodriguez here. Thompson here." One by one, 12 voices confirmed their positions. Rachel began issuing orders with the efficiency of someone who'd commanded troops in active combat zones. "Stevens, Rodriguez, secure the armory and get non-lethal suppression equipment. Thompson, Miller, coordinate evacuation of Block A through the east emergency exits. Everyone else, establish perimeter security." But the inmates weren't trained soldiers, and the situation was deteriorating rapidly. The building's structural charges were clearly already in place. This had been planned for months. The explosives would detonate whether people were inside or not. That's when Rachel made a choice that would define her legacy. She turned to Tony and the other riot leaders, men who moments before had been ready to kill guards and prisoners alike. "I need your help," she said simply. "Not as a colonel to subordinates, but as one human being to another. There are 300 people in this building. Some of them are bad people, some made mistakes, some are here unjustly, but none of them deserve to die because of someone else's conspiracy." She looked directly at Tony. "You killed a federal agent. Nothing can change that. But today, you can save 300 lives. Help me evacuate this facility, and I give you my word that I'll speak at your clemency hearing." The silence stretched for 5 eternal seconds. Then Tony nodded once. "What do you need?" What happened next would be studied in crisis management courses for decades. Rachel coordinated the evacuation with the precision of a military operation, using inmate leaders as section commanders and establishing clear chains of command. Tony's gang members became crowd control specialists, herding frightened prisoners toward exits. Rival gangs that had been at war for years suddenly worked together under Rachel's direction. She established communication with FBI tactical teams outside, providing intel on the building's layout and the location of hidden explosives. Her 8 months of observation had given her intimate knowledge of every corridor, every security weakness, every possible escape route. With 4 minutes to spare, the last person cleared the building. Rachel herself was the final evacuee, ensuring that her count matched the facility roster exactly. She'd accounted for every single life. The explosion, when it came, leveled 3/4 of the facility. But every guard, every inmate, every support staff member survived. As Rachel emerged from the building, she found herself facing FBI Director Patricia Hayes, who'd arrived by helicopter as soon as the situation escalated. "Colonel Martinez," Director Hayes said, offering a crisp salute. "Operation Shadowbook was supposed to end with intelligence gathering, not heroics." "The situation evolved, ma'am," Rachel replied. "Mission parameters changed." Around them, inmates and guards who had survived the ordeal were being processed by federal agents. But something extraordinary was happening. Hardened criminals who'd never shown respect for authority were voluntarily cooperating, answering questions, providing information about the conspiracy that had nearly killed them all. Tony approached Rachel as she was being debriefed. The massive man looked smaller somehow, humbled by what he'd experienced. "Colonel," he said quietly, "I want you to know what Agent Hendricks was trying to do, the investigation she died for, it was right. I was wrong. About everything." Rachel nodded. "Thank you, Tony. What you did today." Patricia would have been proud. Guard Captain Stevens, who'd been cleared of any wrongdoing during the investigation, shook his head in amazement. 8 months. You were here for 8 months, and I never suspected. You saved my life, ma'am. All our lives." "That's what we do," Rachel replied simply. 3 weeks later, Rachel stood in the Pentagon briefing room, addressing a joint committee of military and intelligence officials. The investigation she'd completed had uncovered a massive espionage network, leading to 17 arrests and preventing the leak of classified information that could have cost American lives overseas. But the part of her report that drew the most attention wasn't about espionage or intelligence gathering. It was about something more fundamental, about leadership, about the capacity for redemption, about what happens when someone refuses to accept that any situation is truly hopeless. "The inmates of Federal Correctional Institution Riverside taught me something," she concluded her briefing. "They reminded me that authority isn't about rank or title. It's about taking responsibility when no one else will. It's about seeing potential for good in people that everyone else has written off." The committee chairman leaned forward. "Colonel, your actions during the crisis went far beyond your mission parameters. You exposed a deep cover operation to save lives. Some might call that a failure of discipline." Rachel's response became legend in military circles. "Sir, my mission was to gather intelligence on enemies of the United States. What I discovered is that some of the people we'd written off as irredeemable criminals are actually patriots who just needed someone to believe in them. That intelligence seems far more valuable than any information about arms dealers." 6 months later, Rachel received the Intelligence Star for Valor, one of the highest decorations in the intelligence community. But she treasured something else more: a letter from Tony Carrera, whose life sentence had been commuted to 25 years, based partly on her testimony about his actions during the crisis. He was now working as a crisis counselor for at-risk youth, teaching them that it's never too late to choose a different path. The letter was simple. "Colonel, you didn't just save our lives that day. You showed us that we were worth saving. Thank you for seeing soldiers in a room full of prisoners." Rachel kept that letter on her desk as a reminder. Sometimes the most important missions aren't the ones in the briefing books. Sometimes they're the ones that find you when you're just trying to do the right thing, one choice at a time. The woman they'd thought was just another prisoner had revealed something more powerful than any secret skill or hidden talent. She'd shown them the transformative power of leadership, the strength that comes from taking responsibility for others, and the extraordinary things that happen when someone refuses to give up on human potential. Before you go, tell us in the comments, which country are you watching this video from? And don't forget to subscribe to Her Force Tales for more incredible stories, and hit like, share and comment to support the channel.